Hey guys, time for me to go over another mission type. This time it's one that by now you've probably no doubt done and already understand: assassination missions. Now each assassination mission is going to have its own associated boss, and each boss will have its own tactics. And I'm not so much getting into the tactics, I'm just going to get into the actual mission. What is an assassinate mission? Assassinate mission is simple. You have one target in a stage, and you have to kill that target. That target is always a boss. This makes it a little bit more difficult than just running up to them and murdering them. Simple, because bosses all have their own special little tactics and moves associated with them. Any frame can do the assassination missions. Some can do it a little bit easier or different ways than others. For instance, if you had a Loki, you could pretty much just go invisible and run through all of the enemies and ignore them until you got to the boss. Same thing with Rhino and his iron skin, really. Because all of the enemies over the course of the stage aren't really important, outside of if you were just trying to kill them so you could get, you know, affinity gain or the average things you would be killing enemies to try to get. So really, the point of an assassinate mission is to get to the boss. A lot of people, especially after they've figured out how they work and what the boss is good against or weak against, will kind of just rush through these missions because the benefits of ignoring all the enemies and just getting straight to the boss are pretty big. The amount of effort that goes into most of these stages is pretty minimal because the fact you can run by all the bad guys and ignore them up until the boss. There's many benefits to these missions, however, because the bosses are guaranteed to drop a Warframe piece. Different bosses have different Warframe pieces, so which frame you get is going to depend on which boss you're fighting. But they also have a very good chance of dropping whatever the third resource is for a planet. So, especially for instance, if you were looking for Orokin cells, you might go and fight the Sargus Ruck boss because he has a good chance of dropping those. The only real downsides to these missions is that not all bosses are created equal, and some are more difficult than others. Granted, this isn't really so much a negative, really, but it could be if you were having a hard time fighting the boss. Of course, fighting in parties will always help this out, but some people like to do things solo, so they just might not want to party up like everybody else would. Me standing on top of the boss has apparently made it kind of hard to see him, but lo and behold, he has died. When you kill the boss, it's just extract. So really, an assassination mission is essentially just a exterminate where you only really have to kill one enemy. You can kill all the other enemies if you want, but it doesn't really matter. I should clarify that enemies will continually respawn over the course of this mission, so it's not like there's a hard limit of enemies for if you decide to stay and just keep murdering everybody. But that's generally expected of every mission that isn't just normal exterminate. The benefits are nice, the amount of time you have to put into the mission is pretty low. You can certainly spec out some Warframes to really just blow through these. Like I said, you could get, say, a Rhino Prime with a maximized iron skin of sorts so that you can just ignore enemy fire and not have to worry about it. packaged with a couple of speed mods, and you can get to the boss almost quicker than you could imagine. Same with a Volt. A Volt could move really fast to get to the boss. So there's really no limit on what frames you want to do, although some are more optimized towards rushing through the mission. They can be incredibly short, and as you can see here, this boss rewards Rhino parts. And he also rewards a quest and a couple of nav segments, but those are related to something else that's not really important. So that's an assassination mission. You go, you fight a boss. In rare instances, there's 2 bosses. You beat the boss. You're rewarded with possibly a 3rd tier of resource, like an Orokin cell or whatever, depending on the planet you're on. You are rewarded with a blueprint piece to one of the 3 parts of a Warframe. And you also end up getting messages a lot of the times, which we went over in a different thing, which is basically you saying you've been marked. We've gone over marks in a different video. That's assassination missions. They're not really necessarily great for stocking up on affinity because, well, unless you're sticking around and killing a bunch of dudes, most people are just powering through to the boss, killing the boss, and then being done with it, leaving the stage, getting their rewards. The nice part about the fact that it's so easy like this is that you can do them very quickly. You can do them solo very quickly. And if you already have the actual frames that the parts are dropping for, you can always go to your inventory and actually find them within your inventory to sell those parts. And they go for a good 25,000, I believe, 2,500, something along those lines. I'm trying to remember where exactly it puts those. Yeah, so $2,500 generally per blueprint that you can get from a boss. So it's, if you're farming for that 3rd resource and you just continually keep doing that boss over and over and over, you can end up stocking up a little bit on money as well, outside of just that. The RNG for the bosses is iffy, as usual with RNG. Sometimes you'll get exactly what you want out of it, sometimes you won't get what you want out of it. Some assassination missions, like the very first Vahek, don't actually drop a Warframe blueprint, although he does drop some weapon blueprints still. But for the most part, every assassination boss is associated with a Warframe drop, unless things get changed around in the tables. It's straightforward, it's quick, it's relatively easy as a mission type. The bosses will range the gamut from easy to hard depending on how effective you are with your character and your gear and how much of their patterns you learn. That would be more appropriate for a video about the bosses, which this one isn't really so much about. It's just about the mission type. If you have any questions, comments about assassination missions, feel free to leave a comment below. I'll try to address it when I get the chance. If you have any tips, feel free to add tips. The Warframe selection on these, like I said, you can use pretty much anybody. If you're aiming to just go as fast as possible, something like a Rhino Prime decked out for speed and Iron Skin will end up working relatively good even for solo runs because you can get there incredibly fast. Likewise, frames like Loki are great because you can go invisible and skip most of the enemy fluff between you and the boss. But when it really comes down to it, any frame will work for boss fights. And which frames excel in the actual boss fight portion of the assassination mission is really going to depend on what boss it is, more so than the mission. But for the mission itself, you can approach it from that aspect of, I just want to get there fast, at which point any fast moving frame will get to the boss fast, and then you'll just have to deal with fighting the boss when you get there. That's it for assassination missions. Hopefully you figured out things that you already knew, because by now you've no doubt played an assassination mission and kind of figured out what it's all about yourself. But if you do have any questions, like I said, leave it below. Till next time, keep having fun.